Okay, so for our first lesson in Plan a Pilot, we're going to be looking at designating pilot users. Microsoft makes a number of recommendations in regards to the criteria to be used for pilot users in order to make sure that you pick the correct candidates and you get the right information and feedback so you can make the proper decisions and understand the business impact of migrating to Office 365. And business impact is one of those concepts that's incredibly important to change management. No matter how large or small an organization you have, I always recommend seeking out service delivery and project management training, such as ITIL and PMP, and just as an aside, Platform Scholar will be releasing courses on these topics soon. Usually what you want to see for pilot participants is a variety of different users and functions with a low to moderate amount of overall use, so that you can account for all possible scenarios while not introducing too much change to your environment at one time. The first recommendation is that you include 5% of your user base, which is generally a large enough sample size depending on the size of your organization, while still being manageable so you don't overwhelm your IT support group or any of the other resources which Office 365 relies on, such as internet bandwidth. Second is a mix of age, experience, and seniority, and this is just to make sure that you don't leave out a particular age demographic or a particular experience level who might interact with technology differently than others, either in general or in regards to their duties within the company. Often the more senior a person is, the less they may use software, but the more important it becomes that it works correctly when needed and with minimal training and IT intervention. Also, depending on how the business has grown or changed over the years, you may still have older ways of doing things that some of the more tenured people still prefer. And you'll also need to be aware of the potential issues with moving these users from the legacy ways to the newer ways. You want to make sure that they're full-time employees because full-time employees will be using the software in a manner that's more consistent with the bulk of other users, assuming your staff is made up of mostly full-time employees. If you pick some part-time employees who only work 15 or 20 hours a week, then you aren't really testing 5% of your organization's use cases. You're testing a smaller fraction. The users should be from different parts of the organization, generally because you want to make sure that none of the functions or roles are omitted. Again, the key here is preparation, understanding the impact that this migration will have on every type of user so you can build a plan for each role and each function to make the onboarding as smooth as possible. The users should be with the company a minimum of 6 months, and that's so that they're familiar with established procedures. You don't want them trying to learn the organization's processes at the same time they're trying to learn new software, because if they have any issues with performing any of the functions, you want to be able to separate whether the cause of those issues is the new software or their unfamiliarity with the processes themselves. On that note, you want to make sure that they're already trained and comfortable with the existing software and don't need to rely heavily on other users to help in their role, because it will be difficult for their peers and mentors to train them on something if they're not familiar with Office 365 themselves. And finally, willingness to provide feedback. If you have users who are shy or quiet or generally don't make waves, you may like these people as users because they're easy, and you may think that they'd be good candidates for the pilot program. But the point of a pilot program is not to give users something new like Office 365 and have them not say anything while you take that as a success, because it's not a success. The goal of a pilot isn't to experience as few issues as possible, it's to gather as much feedback as possible without breaking productivity. So you need to make sure that the pilot users are willing to be vocal about what's working and what's not working. Now, you're probably not going to have to work too hard to hear the negatives, but you need to get feedback on the positives too. They don't need to be cheerleaders or champions of the programs, but they do need to give you the information you need to not only anticipate reactions from other users, but to be able to emphasize those parts of the solution that does make their job easier, as well as prepare for those parts that are going to be painful. You can't just rely on what your expectations for the users are. Now is the time to confirm or disprove those expectations. So a communications plan is very, very important, and it's just another important part of a well-defined project plan. So if you have a PMO or people with project management competencies in your office, you should definitely get them involved at this point. Microsoft makes some tools and templates available to you in the Fast Track program, and we're going to be going over those a little bit later in the objective. Next up, identifying workloads that don't require migration.